Yeah, you can go ahead and get started. I
Yeah.
can just introduce you. So, hi, everybody. I'm Kyle Pedicini, Community and Economic Development Planner for the town of Barnstable. We're working with Camoin Associates, who is our consultant for this project for district improvement financing. We received a state grant last fiscal year, $50,000 from the Real Estate Technical Assistance Program through Mass Development. So, thank you, Mass Development, for your support. To look into this program, we had an initial public meeting about a month ago on the subject, but there is a recording on YouTube if folks want to take a look. That just kind of gave a overview of what a DIF program is.
Mhm.
Rachel's here today to kind of take another step and to talk about again what a DIF program is and how it might work in the town of Barnstable. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rachel.
That sounds great. Thanks, Kyle, so much. Actually, our last public meeting was in March, so spring went fast. We're already in June here. So that's gone fast. Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have a pretty small group here, so if we want, we could certainly go around and just kind of introduce ourselves before we kick it off, just so we all are acquainted with each other. So as Kyle said, I'm Rachel Selsky. I'm Vice President at Camoin Associates. I've been working with Kyle and Josie and the team in Barnstable on this analysis for probably since January or so. Our firm does this type of analysis all around Massachusetts, specific to DIF, but there's a similar tool called a TIF, tax increment financing, that is all around the country, and we've done that type of analysis all around the country, and we focus on all types of economic development related work, but here working mostly with DIF. So I will hand it over to Josie, and then Josie, if you want to hand it off to the next person, and we can go from there.
Hi, I'm Josie Santos. I am representing Mass Development. I'm the TDI fellow here. I have been working with Kyle and Camons and all the other partners here. It's my pleasure here today and to have Rachel to present to us, what is the DIF, the work we're doing. So I'm going to pass it for Felicia Payne.
Oh, hello. Excuse me. My name is Felicia Penn. I'm the current president of the town council in the town of Barnstable, and I'm a native of Hyannis. And I think I remember a meeting about DIFs a couple of years ago that we had at the transportation center. And so I didn't really understand it then, so I hope I get it now.
Yes, we'll work on that.
And so I'll hand it off to Carlos.
Perfect.
Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Barbosa. I'm a member of the Brazilian community and the Cape community, and I'm a developer in town.
Nice to meet you. Thank you. Amanda, I'll hand it off to you. Just to introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda Gregoire. I am Director of Site Planning at Mass Development, and I've had the privilege to be working with Camoin and the staff in Barnstable to learn more about DIF and seeing if it's a fit for your community.
Yeah. How about Charlie? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Charlie Bloom, Town Councilor, Precinct 9 in Hyannis.
Hey.
Nice to see you all.
Thanks for being here. I will hand it up to Matthew.
Hi, I'm Matthew Levesque, Barnstable Town Councilor, Precinct 10.
Great. Thanks for coming. And Elizabeth? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. I'm Elizabeth Worfbane, Executive Director of Hyannis Main Street Business Improvement District.
Oh, great. Thanks for coming. Roberto.
Hi, I'm Roberto, owner of Starbuck Construction Service. I'm a builder and developer in Hyannis.
Great. Thanks for coming. Michelle.
Hi, I'm with Starbuck Construction as well.
Oh, great. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
Kristen.
Hi, Kristen from Barnstable Town Council, Precinct 2.
Great. Thanks for coming out tonight. Paul.
Hi, good afternoon. Paulo Paraguay, business owner in Hyannis. I own the Candy Corner and Polio Pizzeria on Main Street, Hyannis, and here to learn more about DIF.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank
and
you.
Then there is also a Paul, but he might not be able to. Paul Cleary, if you can hear us, feel free to introduce yourself. There you are.
Hi, Paul Cleary, I'm a property owner in Barnstable and work on a couple of other development projects in Barnstable County.
Great. Thanks for coming out. Bob, how about you?
I'm Schulte. I'm a resident of Centerville, recently appointed to one of the ad hoc zoning committees. Just interested to learn more about TIF.
Wonderful. Brendan?
Hi, everyone. Brendan Julian with Wind Development, Boston-based developer, property manager, here as well to learn more about TIF.
Great. And Andrea?
Hello, I'm Andrea D'Souza. I'm a broker owner for By the Sea Realty and also property management as well.
Great. Thanks for coming. And then there's someone called Jack Trade. I don't know if that's a person.
Hi, I don't know if you can, my name is Indri and I am representing Jack Trade LLC or Conrad Watson. I'm the property manager and we do own few businesses in Hyannis and we're here to learn about TIF.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to share my screen so that I can walk you through the presentation. Feel free to jump in throughout with questions, but I did just organize it in a presentation. So tonight we'll do introductions. I did talk previously back in March about what a diff is, but I want to, just for anyone who wasn't here, just kind of reset the stage for everyone just briefly. And then I'll talk a bit about the analyses that we've done in the recent months working with the town of Barnstable team, some of the results of that analysis, and then we can have an open discussion. So what is a DIF? What is District Improvement Financing? So really, you know, it's always important to really set the stage and say that it is not a new tax for property owners within the district. This is not a special assessment. Their property tax bill will not look any different as a result of the DIF being passed. If the community chooses to pass the DIF, the property owners within the district will not see anything different on their property tax bill. It really is just a way for the community to use new tax revenue within that is within that district and captured from growth to fund important public infrastructure projects that are intended to drive economic development opportunities within the district and within the community. So again, it's not a new tax or assessment on the district or parcels within the district, but it's a financing tool that communities in Massachusetts are allowed to use to establish within a particular district where they want to see certain types of economic development growth, a funding tool, a financing tool to fund specific projects. And so that is what a DIF is. The community is, Massachusetts state law has allowed this type of tool to be used to fund public projects. A DIF is a way that communities can create a designated funding stream to pay for public projects that drive economic development. By establishing a DIF, you are signaling that you're serious about supporting and encouraging private investment within this area and are willing to make public investments to make that happen. So in short, DIF enables public projects, funds public projects that encourage private investment and expansion, and the private investment in turn generates new growth, increase in assessed value of that district, creating increased property tax revenue, and a portion of that new property tax revenue can then be used to pay for the public projects. That's why we see it kind of as a circular tool, or we use this circular metaphor, where as you make the public investments, it creates a more positive business environment. The private sector creates investments. It drives up the overall assessed value of the district as there's more development and more demand. That creates additional property tax revenue. A portion of that property tax revenue can then be used to fund additional public investments. And this cycle continues. DIF is a really flexible tool that many communities have found different ways to use it. It can pair really well with grants and bonds and other financing tools that communities use as kind of like a supplement or a funding stream, just some additional revenue that can be used to pursue different types of programs or projects that were intended to drive economic activity. It's a really great way to communicate the community's desire to drive economic development to the larger private sector. And it is also a great way to identify a specific funding stream for projects that maybe you want to do, but you've never quite been able to figure out how to fund them. It establishes a set aside of funds that can be used by the community to pay for different types of projects that they want to get done. So it's really establishing the funding stream to pay for those planned projects that you may have identified for your community. So within the town of Barnstable, with partnership with Mass Development, we're interested in understanding how a DIF might be beneficial for the Hyannis area, for particularly in downtown Hyannis. And so we have been in this information gathering phase where we have been looking to understand what is the potential new revenue that could be generated as a result of establishing this DIF and kind of portioning off a bit of the new tax revenue into a DIF fund. What order of magnitude, what type of new development could occur? What is the potential funding that we might be able to set aside? What are some projects that the community could fund within the district as a result of using this DIF funds? And so we've really been in the information gathering work so far throughout 2024, working closely with the Mass Development team and the Barnstable team to understand what the opportunities are. So you can kind of see the top section, steps 1 through 5 we've completed so far. And really that is where you're gathering the information that can then inform the decision regarding 6 and 7, whether as a community you would like to pursue this. And so I'm going to walk us through 1 through 5 tonight so that we can see, what are the results of the analysis of really getting into the weeds of the numbers. So the first task is to establish the district. So for the Hyannis downtown, the district aligns, the DIF aligns with the growth incentive zone. It includes 850 parcels. And this is the area here on the map. So that was our first task. And this table just kind of shows you the breakdown of the type of parcels that are within that district. The second task really was getting into the weeds, trying to understand what type of growth might occur within those parcels. What is the potential new assessed value that could occur within the DIF district? And so we conducted a market analysis and worked with the team to develop assumptions about the type of growth that might occur within the district if the DIF is established and investment is made in improving the overall business environment. So through that, we identified a series of known private investment projects. So projects that are kind of in the pipeline, that are, pretty good potential, more likely to happen. So we identified about 19 known private projects that are kind of being discussed. They're in the development pipeline. We then identified a series of other parcels that are likely to have either midterm development potential or long-term development potential, all based on a series of analyses that we conducted regarding current level of parcel utilization, their current zoning, how much of it is the assessed value of those parcels compared to the improvement assessed value. So we went through a whole series analyzing the 850 parcels to identify of those which have long development potential. And so we came up with 162 parcels that could potentially see development over the next 25 years. And we developed a low growth scenario and a high growth scenario. So if those 162 parcels are developed, least dense amount of development on those parcels versus the greatest amount of development on those parcels based on zoning allowances, so that we could really provide you with a range of what is the development potential within this district. And so what's important to say here, and I think it's obvious, is that all of this work that we've done so far is really just to inform the decision-making of the community. All of these are estimates to say, if these things were to happen, what is the potential new revenue that could be generated? A DIF, and in this case for the town of Barnstable, since they're not obligating the funds to anything, it really is a fund that would see growth as the community grows. You're not obligating yourself to, pay off bonds or have any legal requirements. You're only establishing a source of funding that you can then use to go and do these different projects. So all of this is based on estimates and assumptions, really just trying to get into what is a reasonable level of development that might occur within this area. And so that's why we do the low and high growth scenarios. So you'll remember we had those 162 parcels. From there, we estimated what the new assessed value of those parcels are likely to be. We broke that into residential and commercial, midterm and long-term growth. We did this in conjunction with the assessor, just understanding different types of uses on the parcels. What would the likely assessed value be under the different development scenarios? So using these assumptions that we developed, we estimate that over the life of the DIF district may see an increase in overall assessed value of between $297 million and $665 million in overall assessed value. Again, this is over a period of 25 years. And so we have our low and our high timelines. So over that 25 years, you'll remember we have our total growth assessed value of $297 million and $664 million. If we apply the current property tax rate to that change in assessed value, we see a generation of new property tax revenue for the community between nearly $30 million and $58 million in new property tax revenue over the life of the DIF. An important piece of the work on the DIF legislation, should the community decide to go forward with implementing a DIF, is to determine what portion of that new property tax revenue is directed to the DIF fund each year, and what portion will still go to the general fund. Because the community can make a decision, 50-50, any new property tax revenue, 50% goes to the DIF fund, 50% goes to the general fund. For this analysis, we assumed that for the first 10 years, 50% of the property tax revenue would be directed to the DIF fund and 50% to the general fund. And then for the remaining 15 years, 25% would go to the DIF fund and 75% would go to the general fund. So it would kind of ease off of the DIF fund as more development occurred over that life of the time. And so money would, a smaller percent would go into the DIF fund. So under this scenario, over the life of the DIF, between 21 million and 41 million in new property tax revenue would go to the general fund, and about 9 million to 16.5 million would go to this DIF fund. And so this is a really important kind of stopping point to say, using the analysis that we did, the assumptions regarding the development potential within the DIF district, the property tax rates, all those assumptions that we used in conjunction with the town of Barnstable and Mass Development, the potential new funding that could be used to fund projects within the DIF district is between 8.7 million and 16.5 million. So that's a really important kind of starting place to say, okay, this, that's a good amount of money. What are some things that we could do with that kind of money within the DIF district to create, a positive business environment, improve the quality of place and do placemaking. And so this is kind of a really important, first stopping point for us to understand what is the order of magnitude that we're working with in terms of potential new revenue. So we also, as part of the analysis that we do and as part of the DIF process, need to identify what might the community want to do with the DIF funds. What are some projects or programs that the community would like to fund with DIF revenues? And communities can do a whole range of things. We've seen very specific public infrastructure costs with wastewater treatment plants. We've seen traffic improvements and road improvements, sidewalks. We've seen district management organizations being funded. Really a whole host, whatever the community would like to do, as long as they can tie it back to driving economic development within that district. And so as a group, we worked with the town of Barnstable to really understand what would they see as valuable within the community. And so we talked about establishing potential funding stream using the DIF for different beautification projects, placemaking projects, infrastructure projects within the DIF district to improve the overall business climate, some revitalization, placemaking work within the DIF district. And we came up with a budget of around $300,000 per year. Really working within the understanding of what is the potential DIF revenue, as well as what are some of the projects that the community would like to fund. And so kind of going back to what I said previously, the DIF is a really flexible tool. And if it's used where you're kind of portioning off a amount of that new tax revenue each year into this DIF fund, you can build up a nice little reserve for yourself to be able to do these different projects. You're not required to spend out the $300,000 each year just because it's in the plan. You really are only required to use the funds for things that are in line with what is in the plan. And so different things like street furniture, facade programs, anything within that district that would create a positive business environment where people want to be, where it really improves the street traffic and, sidewalk traffic, all of that would be captured in the way that we wrote the plan here. And so we assumed $300,000 annually just for purposes of our analysis and really to compare revenue to expenses. We assumed $300,000 annually for $6.9 million in total cost. And so if we compare that to the total amount to the DIF fund, if you remember the 8.7 million and the 16.5 million, you'll see that those DIF funds that we were estimating to be generated will cover those costs if we're ballparking about $300,000 per year. So it's important, again, that I kind of, reiterate that all of these are estimates and the town is not committing themselves to a $6.9 million expense over 25 years, but rather it's an informational tool to help make plans and projections about how the DIF funds could be used if the community decides to go down that path. So next steps for the community here, first, really working locally to determine whether there is community support for the DIF, if that portioning of the DIF fund versus general fund is what you want to move forward with. If yes, I would recommend establishing a DIF advisory committee that can really help refine and make any final changes to the master plan. We've provided a draft master plan, but there are little tweaks that can be included so the advisory committee can assist with refining the master plan. You would then follow your typical public process to adopt the DIF master plan, and that includes some legislation, resolutions, different requirements that would be required for any type of public process or adoption that the town would go through. And then once it is established, you would have the assessor determine the annual new growth each year of the district. So how much is change in assessed value has occurred above and beyond typical market changes. And then therefore, what is the new property tax revenue and what portion goes to the DIF fund? The advisory committee would ensure that the correct portion is going to the DIF fund. They would oversee the use of the DIF funds for any public projects. And there would be annual reporting by this advisory committee on the use of the funds and the overall program to the town council. So that's essentially kind of the overall next steps. From now that we have the background information, those would be the next steps for the town to consider implementation. Great. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see everybody. Oh, Felicia, I see you have a question. And you're still on mute, so if you want to just...
I have two questions.
Sure.
Wouldn't the private investment increase assessed value without being designated as a DIF? I mean, anytime there's improvement to a property, the assessed value is going to improve, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And I guess my question is, couldn't the town just split the tax revenue on its own? In other words, we could meet with the financial directors of the town, and we do this with other funding in town now, between private roads, sewer, et cetera, et cetera. We have X amount go this way, X amount go that way, depending on the parcels. So the town basically could identify whatever parcels it wanted to, if that was even necessary. Or we could just say, gee, over the next X amount of years, we'd like to split our tax increase revenue the following ways, this being among them.
Yeah. So yes, absolutely.
I just kind of have a concern that the growth incentive zone is a pretty large area, but the money's usually concentrated in a pretty small area within the large area.
Oh, interesting.
So economic development has a very broad definition.
Yep.
And you know, if somebody said we should invest in fiber, you know, broadband for the entire growth incentive zone area, there's a lot of residential in there, and the idea being that that would fill the gaps and allow a lot more people to work from home than could work from home now. Maybe they have to access the library or other places to go. But that would still qualify for economic development. I don't know, we're just throwing these questions that I'm sure you've heard them before.
Yeah. So Kyle, really quick, I'll go and then you can, I can see you want to say something too. So yes, absolutely. I mean, I think any community can choose how they want to, you know, divvy up the funds that come in from new property tax revenue. So yes, of course, the assessed value would go up, the property taxes might go up anytime that, you know, a new investment is made. However, a DIF is a really good tool because you can communicate to the larger development community that you are invested and you are taking steps to drive activity to this area, that you're taking steps as a community to be supportive. And so it's a great kind of communication tool that you are putting in place a funding stream for these future projects that maybe you have listed in different plans or, you know, in different sources, but you're putting in the steps to establish the funding to make it happen. And so, yes, you certainly could, and it's up to the community if that's the way that you want to go, but it can be a good tool for that communication component. And Kyle, I know it looked like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I would also say it sends a message to the residents of Hyannis that, new growth that's generated in Hyannis. A portion of that will be rededicated back into investing into Hyannis to make sure the quality of life for our residents isn't, negatively impacted by this new investment, and we can keep up with the infrastructure needs and whatnot. To your question, Felicia, like, couldn't the town just kind of do this without a diff? They could. That was kind of the discussion when I worked in the town of Yarmouth. They did a diff for, sewer infrastructure improvements. And the discussion there was like, well, yeah, we could just dedicate new growth to it every year, but that would require town meeting approval every year. And you never know what's going to happen at town meeting. You don't know what the political leadership will be like 10 years from now or whatnot. So it kind of sets it, I don't want to say in stone, but it sets it up so it's kind of an automatic thing. But I think the message here is like we're taking some of this new growth in Hyannis, and we're going to make sure it's reinvested back in Hyannis, where the areas that are going to be impacted by this new growth. And it's funny you mentioned broadband. I actually just asked Rachel that right before the meeting started. We could use this for broadband too, right? And yes, yes, we could. So yeah, all good questions, Felicia.
Yeah, we would just need to write it into the plan as, something that the community would want. As long as it's in the plan, you can use it for it. And then if down the road things change and you would like to amend the master plan, it's actually quite flexible. So there are lots of opportunities to either add things to the diff. You would have to go through the process, right? But you could add things to the plan to fund, and you can also, if it looks like you're getting, if you're getting too much money in the diff fund and you want to transfer money back to the general fund, you can always do that as well. And so it's quite a flexible program in that way.
Although I will say there's never going to be an end of public infrastructure needs, and specifically in the GIZ area. We worked with the Department of Public Works to figure out the extent of the projects that are going to have to be accomplished in the next 25 years. And they totaled up over $80 million in terms of different sewer and water and different infrastructure improvements. So these funds could help with that, but they could also do some creative projects, like, for example, our facade grant improvement program, which we rolled out the past couple of years with the bid for properties in downtown Hyannis. Doing it through this would allow us to kind of expand the boundary and make it, more of our downtown area instead of just restricted to the bid. But that's something we've heard from both businesses and residents that has been, well received. And again, in an era where we're seeing new investment, we want to make sure we take care of our existing business community so they don't, suffer negative gentrification effects. So that's a way we can do that through our facade improvement program. This would be a way. There's not really an existing funding stream. We did that through our transformative development and initiative program. That's going away in a year. So it's kind of like, how do we continue this nice momentum and this good progress that we've built up through working with Mass Development and Josie and TDI? After they leave, how can we kind of continue this momentum? This is a possible way to do it.
Good question. Yes, Paolo.
Good afternoon. So I just wanted to kind of tag along what Kyle had said about the facade program. We were the recipients last year of that program through Mass Development. And as a business owner, not necessarily a property owner within the street, it's a huge a benefit for a business owner to be able to utilize some of those funds to improve the property. And again, it's a matching 80-20 from 20% coming from the business owner, whoever the applicant is, just to be able to improve the facade of your business and the downtown. So just wanted to second what Kyle said, and the fact that we will only be having this program through Mass Development for the next year or so, and then there's a chance that we hope it's something that comes along the way that we'll be able to subsidize that. But then I just wanted to confirm with you, Rachel, in terms of improvements, a lot of this DIF funding could also be for, right now I walk the streets of Main Street Hyannis every single day, and we need, the sidewalks need to be repaired. We need improvements to crosswalks. Right now, it's not very safe. Is that something that we could utilize some of those funds for to make the street? We have a project down the road with a 2-way coming up. Is that something that some of the funding could be used for?
Yep, absolutely. And that is in the plan right now, as well as I think it's also important to say that while the diff funds would likely not cover the full cost, you would be able to supplement, you know, it plays really well with other tools. And so you would be able to supplement, kind of cobble together lots of different funding sources. And so that can absolutely be a use of the diff funds.
Excellent, thank you. And I mean, that whole area there covers pretty much everything within the downtown, everything from the waterfront to the west end. So it's a big area to cover that needs, you know, that needs a lot of attention for the community. So thanks.
Good, thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead. Yes, go ahead, Carlos.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what, as a developer and a builder in town, how that can help us. I still don't get it.
Yeah. So I think the way it helps developers is the intention would be that it creates an environment within downtown Hyannis that is really attractive to people to want to live and shop, and so the idea would be that it creates, increases value of your projects. And so that, the community is stepping up to make investments in creating a more vibrant downtown area near your developments if you're developing or owning property in that area. And so that would have a benefit for you.
So another question is regard to financing. So if I building something on an area, on a facade area, if I go to the bank to try to get a loan, is that the bank will help us better because it's in a district that having all this improvement? Is that something?
Yeah, I mean, the bank may look on that favorably as for a location, but I don't know if you went to the bank and said I'm in a diff, if they would give you a lower interest rate. I wouldn't expect that necessarily, but if the overall area where you are doing your project is seeing a lot of investment and growth and increased property values, that is always good for development and bankability.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
yeah. Elizabeth, did you have something?
Hi, Rachel. The other idea that has been talked about is the Village Green
Yes.
plan, yeah, which would be great for the entire community, because often when we have a public forum on streetscape and what should the downtown have for public art or the public realm, we hear from people more things for families to do, that represent wholesome activities. So having the Village Green be repurposed in some way or redesigned would be wonderful. And I know that there would be ongoing costs for that. So that would get that ball over the line easier, because, often when you have that giant looming sewer project, sewer project or a Village Green, you see what I mean? So
oh yeah,
this would really help make yes happen for some of the pieces. And why the downtown, I heard Felicia say earlier, sometimes a small part of Hyannis gets more attention. It's, there is a backbone of business on Hyannis Main Street. The business improvement district was started because there are so many issues in the downtown over the years, as we all know, and we've made so many strides forward. And that's why business is booming in the downtown, and why Carlos has put some investment in blood, sweat, and tears, and people like him. And there's so much attention, and now we see it works. When you make a place worth living in, more people will want to live there, and that has helped redevelop the whole east end of the downtown. That's why we have a TDI district. I mean, all of this is very intentional for planning purposes. So I'm all for the diff, because I think it will help, with the committee. It's not going to just be one person's idea, but with a big committee, help pull some great projects over the line.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth, yeah, so Village Green is definitely in the mix. So we have placemaking beautification projects listed on the master plan as things that could be funded. So we had Village Green upgrades in mind, also Bismore Park stuff in that area. So yeah, absolutely. Some kind of open space-esque improvements could absolutely be funded.
Mhm. Great. All right. Well, I'm not seeing anyone else come off mute, so that usually is my cue. Josie, did you want to say something? See, you're off mute.
No,
Accidental.
Because
Okay.
I think you guys covered up everything about the village green infrastructure, all the benefits for the DIF to improve the district, is the key to have the DIF in Barnstable.
Yeah. Good. And I see, I'm sorry for your name, but Jack
Hi.
Trade, you came off. Go ahead.
Yeah, Indri again.
Yes.
I just would like to comment on, I like the idea of DIF because I know the town can do, like say, okay, they're gonna do this, set aside this or like project this or project that. But sometimes that can deviate, like because it's depending who's running it at the time. Things can change when people, because they're not gonna, it's not staying forever. So people change. When people change, opinion change.
Yeah.
Point of view is change. It's not. So if diff, like, like you're from outside, like kind of from outside, right? And I mean, setting it aside is like, it's more, I think it will get done.
Yes.
Better chance to get done. That's what I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think so just I think you're absolutely right. There is flexibility if down the road, something major happens and there is a need to change something, you would go through the whole process again. So it is flexible. You're not writing it in stone. There is flexibility. You can, go through the whole process again and adjust or update it as needed, which I think is nice. But it does make it creates a little bit of friction so that it's not just at the whims of the politics. So I think you're right there. Bob, did you have something?
Yeah, just a question, and I'm all new to all of this, but
sure.
I understand once the DIF is established and property values start to go up and you start funding, it self-funds the pool of money. But help me understand the process. Once you decide you want to start a DIF, where do the funds come from to begin with to start making these improvements?
Great question.
Then attract the developers, which starts the whole circle. How does that whole thing work?
Yeah, that's a great question. The timing of it all is a little funny. So what you would do is you actually start, the base assessed value is of the assessed value of the DIF district is January 1st of 2024. That was like the most recent, that would be the starting date. And so then anything that is change in assessed value above and beyond just typical market growth. So it has to be like a project, an actual private investment that occurs, starts to then accrue that new investment, and you can start to build up the DIF revenue, the DIF fund. So the community could choose to make an initial investment in the area and then pay itself back through the DIF fund. So that's kind of that you could do it that way. Or you could wait until that DIF fund starts to accrue some growth over time. And then you can use the fund that's in that account to pay for the projects.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. It's a financing tool within the community. They would need to know how they could move the different funds, and we've been in close touch with the assessor and them as well. So everyone is on board. Kristen, did you have a question?
Yeah, going on off of what Bob said and what your response was. So if there are two options, one being once a project gets built, we put money in a fund and we start accruing funds to use for the DIF. That's option one. And option two is we could say we put in a certain amount of money right now. In your experience working with communities, how often do people choose option one and compared to option two? So wait for projects to accrue to make enough money.
Yeah, typically they are they're working to accrue enough money and then doing some projects.
And how many other communities have you worked with in setting up?
Yeah, we've worked with, I just had the list up, I want to say 8 or so other communities working with DIV. We worked really closely with Mass Development several years ago, maybe 2018, on creating a guide to DIF, and then did a series of pilot projects with them. So we did a bunch of diffs then, and then more recently there's been another flurry of them. And so I've been working with the town of Yarmouth, Dedham, Revere, Fitchburg, Gardner, all just within the last year or two. So they're all still kind of going through their process.
Okay, in the list of people that you've been working with, can you give that to Kyle so that he could give that to people if they want to know and look into other communities and how that's working?
Yeah, absolutely.
And also to Carlos's question about how does this help the funding, like financing for developers? Have there been any statistical tracking as far as to know, does this actually help those developers be able to get funding more easily? Is that a piece of data that you gather or has been gathered?
Not that I'm aware of. That would be really interesting if they're able to point to it as a kind of a notch or, an extra point in their scoring. That's really interesting. That's something really interesting to consider. And I don't know if maybe Mass Development wants to go back to all the communities that have done DIF and do like a full survey. We've only worked with a portion of all the communities that have done DIF, but maybe that's something Mass Development could work on doing, some outreach on.
And Josie, who's here from Mass Development, how many communities have DIFs currently right now in the state of Massachusetts? If you know off the top of your head, you might not know.
I don't have it at the top of my head, but I can check with Mass Development, I'm pretty sure, because we cover.
Okay. Great. Yeah. I'd be interested in knowing that piece of information. Thank you.
Can I say something? Charlie Bloom here.
Yes.
Okay. With regard to what was said before, we have in town an incredible director of finance named Mark Milne. And we have CFAC committee that is doing a fantastic job. If they were to become involved in a town-based project such as, the DIF, there would be absolutely no politics. And so, Rachel, you slid a little bit too far into that comment when you acknowledged that, yes, we could slip into a political morass. I think we have to be careful with that.
That's fair. I apologize. I understand. And we've been working with Mark, right, Kyle, on this project as well.
Yeah, so the draft DIF master plan right now, there's a DIF oversight committee that would be responsible for basically making recommendations and figuring out how the money is spent. So as it's drafted, there'd be a representative, finance director would sit on the committee. There'd be a representative from the CFAC as well as a representative from the town council. So that's kind of how we had drafted it. So to your point, yeah, we're trying to keep it as apolitical as possible.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Kyle.
Yes, Matthew.
Hi, thanks so much, Rachel, for the presentation. And I appreciate Council Bloom's comments, but it can 100% get political, and I've seen it happen firsthand. Sorry to say, and any committee that we get involved with, love all our residents and everybody getting involved and things of that nature. But to see that someone doesn't get involved in a committee and doesn't have an agenda of what they'd like to see moving forward, I think that's been very clear in my years as a counselor, that people do get involved because they have a clear agenda. So to say, political party necessarily, or just an anti-growth policy, or anything like that, it's it's definite. So I appreciate you working with our directors. And I do think that, and again, citizen involvement and opinion is valued 100% from all different, but you know, it's, again, it is something that you need to be able to, you know, we have hired staff that work for the town of Barnstable to the benefit of the town of Barnstable for a reason. And they receive their salaries and things of that nature because of their expertise and knowledge in certain areas. And we have a lot of those people that work for the town of Barnstable. So again, public opinion is very important. But at the same time, you know, I think there's a weighted value that needs to happen for those who work for the town of Barnstable, you know, moving forward. So, and again, you know, it's just a reality of it. I'm not saying it's bad or good or indifferent, but to say that there isn't any. I appreciate your input. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment, Paul Cleary?
Sure.
So it's kind of touches on a lot of what was said, but kind of goes back to Carlos's point or question. So I'll start with Carlos. Carlos, the DIF district doesn't really help the first real estate projects in with the bank. But what the DIF is an economic flywheel off of that investment that you make as you do economic development on your property. It's adding 50%. Well, this is just an estimate, but it adds 50% of the new real estate taxes into a fund that continues to reinvest into that master plan district, for lack of a better word. That Main Street area is a master plan district. So I'll show my age. Back when I was on Quincy 2000, there was a massive master plan for Quincy Center. And one of the tools, and you need to use a lot of tools, but one of the tools was the establishment of a DIF district. And Quincy just went in front of their city councils for another $150 million of additional DIF. They did not start at $150 million of DIF. That was since Quincy 2000 to 2024. The investment that has been made into that district, but the bones were put in place in that late 90s into early 2000. And, you know, Mark Forrest was part of that Quincy 2000 way back in the Wayback Machine. And I would guess that's why Yarmouth was one of the first small, you know, towns down here in the Cape that put in place the DIF over in Yarmouth, and Kyle was part of that. So it's not going to be day one, but it's a commitment from the community that we're really going to focus on a long-term, I forget how many years, 40 years? We're going to focus on a long-term commitment to using these new real estate tax dollars to constantly reinvest in this district. So, you know, the early adapters help drive and help the community by their investments, but it by itself doesn't necessarily help you with the bank. So
thanks, Paul. I appreciate you clarifying that to me. I really appreciate that. And I'm totally in favor of this. This is going to be great for our town, I believe so.
Great. Thanks, Carlos. Thank you, Paul. Wonderful. Anything else? This is such good discussion tonight. I'm so grateful everyone was here and able to have this discussion. This is wonderful. Okay. So kind of next steps on my end, I'll be working with Kyle and Josie and Amanda to wrap things up. I will be assisting throughout the next steps, whatever the community does decide to do. I will be available to the Barnstable team for assistance. And then always available as well if it, over the next couple of years, if there are questions that come up. So I'll be available to the team. But thank you, everyone. Kyle, any last words or anything else?
Just thanks everyone for coming and for your questions. This meeting was recorded, so we'll put it on the town's YouTube page. So if you know anybody who couldn't attend, we'll put it on the YouTube page.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you all so much. Have a good evening.